good morning, everyone, and good evening, wherever you may find yourselves. Really great to have you along here today. Part of what I wanted to do in this little segment was just really to provide you with a bit of context about where we've come as far as the GMG journey around AI and mining has gone. So we kicked off this working group approximately 2 years ago, just short of 2 years ago, November 2018. We had our first meeting, and I think it was an exciting start. I think AI was starting to become a bit of a buzz. 2 years ago, there was certainly a lot of talk going on. There were a lot of vendors who were promulgating various AI type solutions, and it was there was certainly a lot of excitement about the potential and the possibilities. And then over these last 2 years or so, we've sort of walked our way through a number of workshops across the globe in all kinds of settings, and I guess one of the big shifts that that I've been able to see through this journey has been the shift from if people are using AI to exactly what are they using it for, and so it's sort of moved away from the potential and the possible to actual real usage within a lot of companies, and we began to see a lot of exciting use cases and people talking about examples of what they're doing in their spaces, and we've also seen a lot of really interesting products begin to hit the market from related vendors. So it's been pretty exciting, I think, to sort of see this journey happen. I guess if we were to ask ourselves why this is the case, and let me provide a little background in terms of my own history here. Some of you, I know I've shared this with along the way in different forums, but my background is applied mathematics a long time ago. Back in the 80s, I actually specialized in did a bit of a focus in my degree around artificial intelligence in the 80s, and it was a very different world back then. A lot of the AI was very focused around knowledge-based AI. It was about the whole concept of trying to help computers understand and think, and there was a lot of analysis done around how do we understand what thinking even means. And I did work in natural language processing, and that was all geared around trying to understand language, how languages are put together. How do you get a computer to really understand the structure of a language and break it apart and extract meaning? And of course, there's many of you who might have been around back then or can guess what things were like back then. There were a number of impediments to exercise, not the least of which was really from a technological point of view. We just did not have the power to embark on some of these types of things. We were pretty limited in what we had available, and so there were some impediments on that front. I think if we look back in the 80s and the first AI big winter that we often talk about that came along, a lot of that sort of was really all about the fact that there was a lot of hype and not enough delivered. And once a lot of the funding to the large defense organizations and other research organizations dried up in that point of time, then a lot of AI stuff just went into hibernation. The technology couldn't really do it. The funding dried up. People weren't seeing the results, and everything just kind of went into a bit of a pause. Now, I think that's probably not entirely true, because there's always a bit of activity going on over a long period behind the scenes. But certainly in terms of mainstream commercial, the kind of stuff Ian was talking about, research hitting the front lines of what people are doing in business, that just wasn't there. So what's changed? When we look at today's context and we look at the rise of what's happened even in our GMG working group, and the way in which things have shifted rather rapidly. And I would suggest a few things have changed in the broader community. I think the first thing that's happened is that funding is no longer sort of one-dimensional. The previous funding that was geared around AI was very geared towards defense organizations and large government funding towards that kind of research. And what we find today is that the funding being invested into AI is just so diverse. It's incredible. Across the world, there are so many different entities who are providing money into AI and machine learning type work that I think is a very different ball game. And so we see this diversity of funding and resourcing for this space. We're also seeing the fact that people have narrowed their focus a little bit in terms of what they're trying to achieve. So instead of this grand, noble idea of trying to get a computer to think, people have just narrowed down and said, well, if I could get a computer to help me with this particular problem here, it's very narrow, but I have data and I can actually apply some algorithms and get some very specific results out of this, and that's worth it to me. The thinking bit, I'm not so interested in. I just want to get a very pragmatic outcome. And I think what we've seen is this narrowing of focus, and particularly around the uptake of machine learning technologies, has really been a massive kind of move where, off the back of that, people have seen very real results and value. And I'm just talking about, whether it's Facebook, whether it's Google, wherever it is, all of these companies have seen very real and tangible value. And along with that diversity of funding, AI is here to stay. I think what we've seen is that really AI is now being baked into pretty much almost anything and everything. And a lot of the AI, we don't even see it. It's just there, and it's doing its thing behind the scenes and producing value in one form or another, whether it's the user experience or whether it's actually very strong commercial type outcomes for a lot of businesses who are utilizing some of these algorithms and models. And I think that broader contextual shift that has been happening over the last decade, that really has been in a bit of an exponential, growth pattern, is something that we've seen in mining as well. And when I look at what we've begun to sort of see in the mining sector around AI, is that some things have changed. Firstly, the tools and the software is actually relatively cheap. So companies wanting to dabble with this stuff, they don't have to sort of, get out massive capex or something and go for huge amounts of funding to actually have a play and do some stuff. In fact, it's quite extraordinary, really, how many free things there are out there, and really in terms of all these big companies like your Facebooks and others who are giving away their tool sets for people to utilize for free is astounding. And so we've seen the fact that tools are cheap. The ticket to play is quite modest. And so a lot of companies have been afforded that opportunity to sort of get in and have a play without having massive approvals or taking, taking big bets. I think the other thing that has changed as well in the mining sector is that we've been collecting data for a very long time. And of various qualities, of course, but certainly data has always been sort of something that we've been collecting more of over time, and particularly with the sophistication of some of the equipment that we use, even things that do quite brutal, unsophisticated jobs like digging dirt. These things produce a huge amount of data which can then be utilized to improve a lot of what we're doing from a process and systems perspective, and a supply chain perspective. And so what we've seen is that we've been collecting data for a long time. People have been doing, sometimes real-time trending and using that data in very simplistic ways. Occasionally, doing some historical analysis to try and understand what went wrong or what the patterns are. But the ability now to take relatively cheap tools and have a play with some of this data, to use the data that we've collected over a long period of time and begin to utilize that to build tools that actually provide some very strong and insightful decision support, is something that I think, as people have played, suddenly the value of the data. I mean, the rhetoric of, data is one of our most important assets. I think we always used to say that, but a lot of people didn't necessarily believe it. But now I think we've seen the value in the data that we've been collecting really start to grow and increase, and that's been a huge thing. And I think, allied to my first point about the tools are cheap, one of the things is, is this fact that you don't need to make big bets to get real value. A lot of companies have seen some really great value out of just taking small bets, focusing their energy around particular problems, not trying to boil the ocean, but just take on small problems and then really work from there. And so what we've begun to see is, I think, across the whole mining industry, maybe not the majority yet, but certainly a very large number of companies who are utilizing AI, machine learning types of solutions somewhere in their business, sometimes without them even necessarily knowing that that's baked into some of the things that they're using. That's on the massive rise. And I think as we look forward to predictive technologies being actively used in maintenance and other spaces as sort of the holy grail of asset management, I think we will begin to sort of see that those narrow focus points slowly expanding and becoming platforms and taking on, I guess, new value. So what we've clearly seen, I would say, over the journey of this group is we've seen this expansion of people's appreciation for AI and a very active usage of it right across the board. And we've certainly seen a lot of interesting vendors who've pivoted in this direction and started to do some really great work. And certainly in the research space, I think to Ian's previous comments, there is this need to begin to take that and to translate that into the industry where it's actually being used out there in the real world. One of the things that we started out with as a group was a very initial paper that was just geared around kind of creating a bit of a foundational piece, getting the language. It was really geared for middle and upper management and just used to kind of set the space and provide a language for it, provide some definitions and a little bit of very high level guidance. We used this, in fact, with our own CEO when he was kind of keen to understand a bit more about AI and where it went. And that first paper was kind of pitched there, that first. And in the process of that project, a couple of other projects sort of were spawned, which are really key ones. One was the recognition that data really is very crucial. And one of the things we discovered was a lot of vendors struggle to get good data to use to build their models, to experiment and play and test what they're doing. A lot of companies would like to sort of do the same, share their data and also get data from others and see what they can build. And so a project was spawned that was really about trying to develop a repository of data sets to really underpin the development of machine learning and AI in the mining space, very mining specific data. And so that project's been kicking along really, really well. And I guess it does have a lot of challenges, but we see a lot of value in that move. The other one that is another big one that got kicked off was really, okay, let's move from generalities to maybe talking a lot more about what it takes to implement AI in a mining company. And there's certainly a lot of challenges on that front, all the way from how do you sort of build pipelines of data and deal with all that data engineering sort of challenges that you have where you've been collecting, messy data and you need to somehow clean it up and create these smooth data pipelines that then allow you to productionize the stuff and scale up and all these kinds of things. Where does ethics fit into the whole mix? So there's certainly a lot of considerations there around how you actually implement and sort of begin to build pipelines and platforms in your business to support the use of AI. And so that second piece that's running now, our third project, is the implementation of AI in mining project. Some of the slides that we might distribute along with the session today sort of cover that and provide a lot of description around what that is. But I guess before maybe pausing to take any questions that anyone has, I think the really key thing that I just want to emphasize as we sort of link up with the other stuff that's going on in this session today is that GMG has a strong commitment not to reinvent the wheel. It is very much a collaborative organization. It's about bringing players together to work together on industry problems and to forge relationships and partnerships with people who are able to contribute to that broader game in our industry. And so we don't want to reinvent the wheel. We want to collaborate. We want to integrate. We want to build these complementary partnerships. And that's why relationships with groups like Ian's group is really key to us. And also the idea of this ARC that's being spoken of in this space today is yet another sort of really key space that we want to partner with, because we see a lot of value in finding ways to sort of work with groups that are doing some fundamental research in this space that can then contribute in and the constituents of a group like GMG can begin to take that up and figure out how that actually can be applied in our worlds. So I'll leave it there. Welcome to everyone. I really hope that you get a lot out today. And as always, what you get out of it is usually very much related to what you put into it. So please participate, get involved, and